from 8, 5 Live.
Sheikh Hamza Yusuf is my guest this morning. So many calls, so if you can try and keep your questions brief, we would appreciate it. Mohammed in Birmingham. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Fee. Good morning, Sheikh Hamza.
Good morning.
Alaikum salam. I just want to ask a question, please. It's to do with the fact that you've been on record saying that Muslims should revive the intellectual tradition, especially the classical heritage of jurisprudence.
Right.
And many people have actually started doing that because of your advice. But what they find is that once they start studying the books and the scholars that are recommended traditionally to try to get a traditional understanding, the teaching that they find is a teaching which is currently condemned as being extremist and fundamentalist. I myself try to study Hanafi Fiqh, and especially about jihad. And the very first line I ever read of a classical text of Islamic jurisprudence on jihad is that jihad is obligatory on the Muslims, regardless of whether non-Muslims attack us or do not attack us. And this is currently being taught in Islamic seminaries throughout the Muslim world by traditional scholars. And I find, for instance, that what you are saying currently, especially just what you have said recently, doesn't seem to gel with what you were saying previously. And I honestly find that there's some sort of disingenuity here, because if we are to discover our heritage has aspects which are not compatible with Western civilization. Jihad. And I just want to bring one point up. You brought up
I'll tell you what, Mohammed,
Taliban.
Let's just hear the answer to that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that, jihad is an obligation binding upon Muslims, which is defense of the homelands. It's also the removal of aggression. But the normative practice of the Muslims has always been that aggression is prohibited. The Quran is very clear on that. La ta'tadu, don't be aggressive in your wars. The Quran says if they incline towards peace, then you too should incline towards peace. The Quran permits, and certainly in traditional jurisprudence, the treaties with non-Muslim nations, and those treaties are to be honored. You will find differing views, there is no doubt, because like I said earlier, Islam is not theocratic in we know exactly what God meant, but it's human attempts at understanding what God means. And that is why, first of all, most of those laws that deal with international relations, that deal with these, have nothing to do with your average Muslims. And when your average Muslims begin to take it upon themselves to implement laws that have to do with state polity and state power, this is where the confusion comes in. It's none of the average Muslim's business to be attempting to apply laws that are directed to the rulers of a country. And this is what's known in the Islamic tradition as fard ayn and fard kifaya. An ayn, everybody has to do, like praying 5 times a day, paying zakat, these things. Kifaya, only those people that need to do it. The other people don't do it. And certainly in rules relating to government, that has nothing to do with the common people.
But I can see where the confusion would lie, though. I mean, if you're advocating that people do read these texts,
no, but if they read them without qualified teachers, absolutely, you're going to have serious problems. You can't just pick up a book and read. Look, in England, no one will allow a barrister who has not been trained in law school to go out and practice law. And constitutional law is certainly, you have to know interpretive practices, hermeneutics. You have to learn how to derive principles. I mean, if we had people reading a book on surgery and going out and performing surgery on people out in the society, it's madness. And so, this idea that I can pick up my book and become a weekend mufti is absolute insanity.
The GMC is very busy dealing with some of those cases to do with medicine at the moment. Mohammed,
can I just come back to one point, please?
Of course you can, and then I want to ask you a question myself.
Okay, the point being, what I'm trying to say, for instance, you mentioned the Taliban themselves. The thing about the Taliban is that they were a government. They were Taliban, which means students. They didn't pick up books and just apply Islamic law. They were advised by Islamic scholars of a certain tradition in Pakistan, the Deobandi school. They themselves had scholars, and they interpreted their understanding of Islam and applied it on their nation, and that was condemned by the rest of the world. Yet from their perspective, they were implementing Islamic law through qualified opinion, and their interpretation has been accepted by a lot of Muslims in the world. And it's an interpretation, and if they are condemned, you're forcing people who accept that interpretation into an extremist camp. And who decides ultimately?
Do you feel, Mohammed, do you feel that you are either tempted or you feel obliged to follow a jihad because of what you've read and because of what you believe you've been told?
No, what I want to do is I want to understand my Islamic heritage and learn from traditional scholars about Islam. Exactly what Sheikh Hamza wishes Muslims to do. Unfortunately, my scholars are the same scholars who learnt with the Taliban. And it cannot be said that the scholars, say, in Mauritania or in Egypt, who have a more liberal understanding, are better Islamic scholars than the scholars that the Taliban have studied under. But they are both follow a tradition. Now, I want to study Islam, and then I want Muslims to implement that in their lives. They shouldn't force it amongst other people, but then they shouldn't be condemned by people for implementing which is traditional Islam, and then said, oh, these are people, these are fundamentalists. I mean, we have certain penal laws in Islam, we have other laws, but we will always be condemned for applying our laws. This is a fact.
First of all, I mean, just in penal punishments, there's 6 penal punishments in the entire Islamic corpus. All the other ones are go under the category of a judge's discretion. In those 6, all of them should be avoided to the best of one's ability. But the point that it comes to the I mean, they said in 800 years the Ottomans didn't cut off any hands or stone any adulterers because people veiled people's faults. If somebody stole from you, if you forgive them, then they're not punished for it. But if you take it to the authorities, then the authorities are obliged to implement the law. A lot of Muslims don't understand these subtleties about Islamic law.
Sheikh Hamza, the problem is the Taliban were just simply condemned for even attempting to apply.
Well,
Islamic law.
You know, my personal feeling about the thought, I was not there, I didn't see it, and I really felt there was an immense amount of disinformation. It's well known in the West that the first victim or the first casualty of war is the truth. And I wasn't there, I didn't see it, so I really don't like to comment on something that and that is a Islamic principle that you should withhold judgment until you really understand something.
What is problematic for so many people, though, is the interpretation of something like Sharia law. We were talking about it on the program yesterday, the honour killings of women who've been raped.
Well, honour killings have nothing to do with Islam. Honour killings occur more in one small segment of the Muslim world, and they occur amongst Christians and amongst Muslims.
Sure, but
and they used to occur if we
justification, or they believe.
No, it's not. It's ignorance. There's absolutely no basis for it. It's absolute, complete ignorance. I'll give you an example. There was a time in America, there was a time in Mexico, where people killed their daughters for dishonoring the family. I mean, you know, this is just a type of a primitive understanding about the world that exists in many, many places, and it has nothing to do with religion. And I think when we conflate religion and culture, when we conflate religion and human behavior, then we're in deep trouble. I mean, I think at the essence of the Islamic tradition, certainly the great world religions, at the essence of these traditions is the concept of mercy. I mean, the Quran begins in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Killing my daughter because she's dishonored me is certainly, I think, has nothing to do with the concept of mercy.
Sure, but then why isn't more of a challenge made in those states? I mean, let's say in Jordan by
honor killing is condemned. No, honor killing is
people.
Condemned by all. I've never met anybody in the Muslim world, and I lived in the Arab world for over 10 years. I've never met anybody that has justified that. They've all seen it as something that's wretched. And I think even probably the people that have perpetrated the crime prior to it actually happening to them probably would have seen it as odious. But it becomes, I mean, this is the nature of culture. Cultures are very deep, and they have dark elements. I mean, we have dark elements here. In the United States, we've aborted over 20 million fetuses since Roe versus Wade. There's a lot of people that consider that to be an incredibly barbaric act of genocide, of mass murder. And I know that it's certainly a debatable point in the secular societies, but there are many. The Catholics view that as one of the great crimes against humanity, and yet it seems to be an acceptable normative practice.